Today at shop.com, we're going to be installing our Mark 7 Facelift LED taillight harness on a Mark 7 GTI. Now, before we get into actually talking about this and giving more details about this, let's just talk real briefly about the difference between these lights versus previous generations. They are very different. Aesthetically, they are different for the fact that the running lights are just generally more attractive in my opinion. But the reason why most people are going crazy over them is because they have fluid dynamic turn signals that are built into the lights themselves, and they look like this. Okay, so before we get into our install, let's talk real briefly about some questions that I kind of expect people may have around these facelift taillights. A lot of customers of ours who have purchased LED taillights previously or maybe already have them on their vehicle, they're going to have some questions around what options you're going to have and things you're going to need to do. So before we do that, let's just get into that for a second and say if these harnesses are completely different on these taillights than the previous generations. The other ones had completely different connectors. These taillights use much more pins on them. There are actually 8-pin connectors on each one of these lights. They all are the same connector. So the other versions were 4 and then 5-pin connectors, which for that reason they will clearly not work. Nothing relating to the old taillights, unfortunately, is able to work for these. This was a completely new harness that had to be developed because the amount of complication of these lights requires a lot of wires, and we had to get very creative to actually make this work on US model cars because we have a lot less to work with to begin with. So with that said, coating is going to be different as well as the harnesses themselves. So unfortunately, if anything you have previously from that stuff, it's going to have to come out of the car and you're going to have to rework it with this new stuff. And then with that said, let's talk about our install. Much like the other install, this is very, very similar to that with no real special tools being required. Basically, the trim panels come off, you have a torque screw, some 8mm and that stuff. The only thing you may want to consider is some of the connectors might be easier to get off if you have a pick set like this. I'll link to ours in the description below where you can get that. And then the only other thing, and this is only an if you need that, is going to be wire terminal tools. We have sets of them. I'll link to those in the description below as well. But these tools are required only if you make a mistake during this install. A lot of these wires have to cross over all over the place for this harness, kind of like the previous one, except for there's a lot more wires that need to go in different places. If you make a mistake and you put a wire in the wrong place, you will need a wire terminal tool to remove it and move it to the correct place. We've had a lot of people who have done that by mistake, recognize they made a mistake and try to pull the wire out. If you do that, you're more likely to just pull the wire straight out of the terminal and will leave the terminal in the connector and the wire out, which means you actually have to replace the entire connector. So you have to pin out every pin on that connector and swap them into a new connector because it's not going to be easy to get the terminal out of an old connector without a wire attached to it, something to pull on. So important notes on that. With that, outside of that, this actually, in my opinion, this is actually a pretty simple install if you feel comfortable with running the wires. We are not going to be shooting a DIY completely. We do have our DIY on our previous one. I'm going to link in the description of this video to a start of removal of all the trim pieces and then the reinstallation of all the trim pieces in the description where you can check that out, and that will allow you to see that if you need that information. If you don't need that information, you can just skip and use this video just for the harness install itself. With that said, let's get into our install. Okay, so here we are on the driver's side of the vehicle, and what we're going to do is start by unraveling our harness and extending all of our wires out so that they're clean to run. And this is the driver's side taillight that would go, or the connector that would go to the outer taillight itself. So we're going to take that, it's a 4-pin connector, and we're going to plug that in. Remember, this is the one that comes from the car, into our harness, and then you can lock that in place. Now, This one has a bunch of open locking tabs. If for whatever reason you end up getting one of these that's come locked, like this one is right here, you can actually put this in and unlock it. Now, this one does not need to be unlocked because the terminal that it's in, it actually is fine, but again, just something just in case. They should come unlocked, but if by chance somehow it gets locked during the process, you're gonna wanna just stick this underneath and kind of pop it in there. You will need something that's pick or something that's sharp because it is kind of a tight fit. So this wire, this set of wires we are gonna run up, and so we're gonna grab our snake, fish it down through our C-pillar and actually get our snake down to come out right here. So as we take our snake and we run it out, that should be about right. So we have our B-pillar pulled back again. If you don't know how to do all this, we have our DIY that you can check out that shows you how to open up all these panels. And so where I like to run is take this and run it towards the front edge here. And there should be an opening. You actually can look down and see there's a spot between where part of this panel actually meets the body of the car. So that one actually, as you see, it came through where we don't want it to come through, which is in between the panels. So you got to get it closer to the body of the car. And as you can see, we're now out. And so what we're going to do is take this wire and pull it up. So this is the longest part right here. What I would suggest you do, because you're dealing with two different wires here, is take these terminals and tape them to this wire. This will be more important as we do that later, and then also kind of tape this. We can kind of hook this around because this isn't really super tight. You won't need to worry about that right now. So we're going to tape this wire actually to the harness itself. What I recommend when you're doing this is actually take it and tape the front portion closer to the end of the harness and kind of ramp it up, because as you get to the top of this harness where it comes through the deck lid, that rubber boot is pretty tight. And so what we've had happen is people will get these terminals hung up in there and they'll rip them off. So that can be a problem. So in this circumstance, I wouldn't go crazy taping. You probably won't need to. You can probably just hook it on. You may consider taping these onto this wire, because if they get hung up and you yank it too hard, you could actually rip the terminal off. But in this case, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to roll with it like this. As long as you're not violent with it, if it gets hung up, then you should be okay with any issues around that getting hung up, and you can kind of feed it through, and as you can see, it gets up there pretty easily. And now we can pull that harness up. And we're going to take away as much slack as possible, really, because all this does is this piece plugs into the taillight itself, so that's going to go into the outer part. Now, you don't want to push that in there yet because we have other wires that come down from the top and you need to get into this connector. All right, now we have all that we just ran up. Again, we pull all of our slack that we can, and then we're going to go ahead and untape this just so that we don't have anything hung up anymore. And this, okay, so now we have our harness here of what we have run. Now this part, I was mistaken when I mentioned that you need to tape this on here to get this through this rubber boot. You probably could just loosely get it on there and not sweat over it too much, because this actually runs to a separate part. So what we do is there's going to be an orange and a purple wire. Now these wires are going to run through the passenger side boot. They're going to go up and through and meet right here. And then you have these other two wires, which are a black and a red wire. Now these wires are going to run through the driver's side boot and run up through here. So we're going to go ahead and get this snake through the driver's side boot for now, so you can see what we got to do there. Now, as we're going to feed this up through this boot, it's important, as I mentioned earlier, that when you feed this up, that you don't get these wires hung up on anything, because what we've seen happen is they get hung up and it actually snaps the terminal end right off. So what I like to do is run them close to the loop of this here, where it's actually going to force the boot to protect it, and then also kind of ramp it up so that nothing gets hung up. So as you can see here, you've formed kind of a wedge here to where it's going to pull through there as smoothly as possible. So let's go ahead and slide that in there. Okay, so now that we've pulled this through, we actually are going to finalize getting all this run. But before we do that, what I want to show you is, here is a boot that we've actually shown. It's a brand new one. It has a clip on the end. This is actually what actually clips it in place here. So what you would do is go from the outer edge, pop it down, and pull it down. Now, one thing I want to note is, because these are brittle and they can break, it's something you want to be cautious of. You may even consider actually heating them up with a heat gun to make them less brittle. It might make your life a little bit easier when you're actually getting these in or out. I did just shoot a DIY on actually how to replace these, so we'll make sure we link to that in the description where you can check out replacing these boots, because it isn't something that's super simple. So we're going to run this up. And pull that through, and this slit right here is actually where you'll actually see that one of the clips from the trunk panel goes. So what we want to do is kind of run over that to make sure that this clears that, and make sure we give ourselves enough slack to run up. Now what I would like to do is I'm going to run these 2 wires down here, and I'm going to take a zip tie and feed it through here to get that actually in place so that we can keep this wiring clean. So I'm not going to do any of it yet, because we're going to have some other wiring running through there, and then we'll run this around here. Don't need to have too much, and then we're just going to leave this hanging here for now, where we will need to plug it into the inner connector. Now we have our driver's side inner harness here, and we're going to plug that guy in. And same deal with this. There's going to be open terminals that we're going to leave here for now. But this wire here, which is a yellow wire, and the way you know this is the driver's side is because this is the one with the green wire. We will try to label them, but we want to make sure that you have all that information up front just in case you lose a label or something like that. And I would suggest try to run it along the same path. Now that we have this run down here, we have it kind of ran through the same spot, and we have it in the same zip tie that's still loose, just so that we can do anything we need to with it before finalizing the install, and we'll have plenty of opportunity to work with that. So we have this run down here. Now we have to run this wire back through this boot. So we're going to take our snake and run it through here the other way, and just like the other one we had, we want to make sure we protect this terminal end. This is a lot of taping and then cutting of tape, but it is going to save you from if you shear off one of these terminal ends. We've had a few people shear them off, and the only way to replace this terminal end, we can fix them, we can repair these, we do have them at this time, but it's something that you have to send it back to us to do, which is not something that most people want to do. So we can repair these terminals, but you need a special crimping tool that's only for crimping wire terminals. Unless you've built a wiring harness before, you probably don't have them, so it's not something that I would expect anybody to have hanging around. And get yourself some slack, and then we're going to run this down here. So same thing, we're going to run the snake now up from the bottom as opposed to down from the top like we just did. Now, because again, this wire is basically not too big of a deal, all you're trying to do is make sure it doesn't get hung up on anything on the way down, because this isn't super tight. I would just hook it in place like this and make sure you feed it down like this. Do it slowly, make sure you feed it from both sides, and then don't let it get hung up on anything along the way. If you do feel like getting hung up on anything, don't just yank. You should make sure that it's feeding through cleanly however you're working with it. So our snake is currently hung up, so I'm going to see if I can get my hand in there and get it released. Because again, never just yank on it. you will end up potentially damaging something, and best case scenario is you bend something on the snake. Worst case scenario, you damage the harness. And there we go. Super simple, and we're through. And now we have our yellow wire here that we can get taken care of on this connector. Now we're going to be putting this yellow wire into this connector. And so what we're going to be putting in is pin 8, which is the last pin down here. But if we show you this connector on screen here, just want to show you all the pins 1 through 8. And we're going to show you what pin 8 looks like. And just so you don't make a mistake, it is that last pin there. And then we can lock everything in place. And now this can be plugged into our taillight. This is all we need to do with this particular their outer harness. Now we have these purple and orange wires that we ran from the driver's side outer harness, and we're going to run that up through this passenger side boot. So now we're going to grab our snake and run it down from here. And just like every other one I've shown, make sure you tape this into a kind of a triangle pattern here that prevents you from getting these terminals hung up as you're pulling through. And then let's pull that through and just feed it slowly, get it up in there, and then just feed it slowly through there, and we're all set. Now these wires are going to run up through here, and we're actually just going to get them up there and then leave them hanging here for now. Now we have our passenger outer harness. This is the one with the orange wires, and we're going to plug that in and lock that in place. And again, we're just going to leave this hanging out because we need to run some other wires down here. So we're going to get these 2 wires fed up, and same deal. What I'd advise with this situation is get these actually taped around here pretty good, because we are going to have to run those up. All right, now again, as we've shown in the past, running it up here isn't super tight, so we just have the wire kind of hooked around here, and then we're going to feed that up. And the other wires are taped to there to prevent them from hanging up on anything. Again, we don't want to have any problems with those terminals. So you see these are out, kind of feed the rest through, and as we've done in the past, pull as much of this as you can through to give yourself as much to work with as possible, because you don't need too much of this to be hanging down there. Now that we have these wires all fed up, we can actually run them through this boot here. Just for clarification, what I've actually had happen is these terminals, as they come through, they bend, and so at this point right here, it'll tweak and it'll actually shear off, because that's not a very strong point of the terminals. It's actually very weak there. So it just shears off the top of this terminal, which leaves you with basically just a stub of wire. So make sure you be careful of that and get it through. And make sure now we're at this section that we taped, make sure that section clears and gets through easily as well, because we want to make sure both those sections are good in there. So it worked great, and we can now remove our tape. Okay, at this point we actually are going to be working with these wires, and let's funnel our wires up through here from the passenger side outer light. And again, watch out for these. You will see them attach here. Make sure to feed everything through nice and clean. All right, so what we are working with now is going to be these wires here. Now we have an orange and a white wire here, and then a orange and a purple wire here. So those are actually going to be for these connectors. These are supplied with the harness, but you actually need them to complete this. So we are going to start with this long skinny one. You actually have to open the release tabs, which in this case are already released, but if you would need to, you stick this inside. There's a purple thing you have to actually slide and click forward. So what we're going to do is take our wires, and we are going to take our orange pin and put it in pin 2. It's actually labeled right here at the back of the connector, and you're just going to get that in there, and you should hear it click, there you go. And then you get your purple one, get that one in there. Same deal, that should click as well. Now once you get those terminals in, you're going to take a screwdriver, a small like this one from our dear friend the home mechanic. He actually has a couple of screwdrivers he has, and you're going to pop this lock towards the other side. Now if you don't pop that lock, you're not going to be able to plug this connector in, so you need to make sure you do that, and be careful the terminals inside there you don't hit with the screwdriver and bend, because obviously that will prevent you from having to being able to plug it in as well. Now on the other side you see this white and this orange one. Now the orange goes to the orange, and so we'll have to make sure they're in the same pin. So we're in orange and pin 2 here, we'll have to go to orange and pin 2 here. Now on this connector there's a purple slide lock here. Now that slide lock has to come out to allow pins to go in and out. So we're going to take our picks and actually slide that out. You can see it just slides out, and in there there's a hole in the side of the connector that slides through. So we cannot put terminal pins in or out of there until we do that. So again, pin 2 here, pin 2 here. This is the part where if you screw up, you're going to need terminal tools to fix this. So make sure you do this right. And we're going to do 2 here and 2 here. I would suggest doing those together, not like I did, because they'll go in a lot cleaner. All right, so that one has 2 wires in it, so it's a little bit tougher to get in, but it'll get in there. Now, once we've done that, we have to put this lock back in. So all you're going to do is take that, the flat side goes down, and then you slide that in, and we can take our pick and just push it all the way until it sits all the way down. Now, these plug in just like that, and you're all set with those. And then we're going to take this and run it over around here. So I'm going to run this wire up to the inner rear taillight. You can kind of keep this however you like and kind of funnel that back in. Give yourself slack to work with however you see fit. But make sure you avoid, again, these slits where everything meets, because you will have those panel clips hit there, and we've seen people who have issues with stuff not sitting properly and potentially damaging wires from when the panels go back on. They end up causing some damage. So we are going to go ahead and leave these wires hanging here and get our inner connector. Okay, so now we plug in our inner connector, just clicks in, and then we are going to take our yellow wire and run that. Now, as we've shown so far, same deal, just going to run this guy, snake right up through here and out. And we're going to take our yellow wire and tape it and run it down just like we did on the other side. And we're going to pull all of our slack through. Now we're going to run this down from here all the way down to that passenger outer light. Now that we have that hooked on, we're feeding it down, and there we are. And our yellow wire is right here. And now we're ready to install in our connector. And as we did on the other side, this one also goes in terminal 8, which we're going to show on the screen right here. Terminal 8, exactly where it goes, so nobody makes a mistake. Again, if you make a mistake here, you are going to need terminal tools to make a correction. And we are all set to lock that in place. Okay, so now we're here on the passenger outer connector. So we have our wires here that we ran up. These are a white and a black wire, and then we also have this blue wire hanging here. So first, let's start with this white wire. White wire will go into pin 1 right here, and we'll show that on screen here where you can check out where pin 1 is. And so we're going to get that locked in here. And then we're going to take this black wire and put it in pin 4. And the locking tabs, just so you see, go perpendicular to the direction of the connector. So they're going to be on the top and bottom. And they click in. Now we are going to lock this top white one in place, and then we can lock the bottom black one in place, and then we're going to run this blue wire. Now we have to run this blue wire. What we're going to do is plug this connector into the taillight. Now the reason why we have that in there is because this has to run to the other side, but what you want to do is make sure that you have the correct amount of length to kind of get you there. So you can see here that that's going to get you there. You just have to figure out the best way to clean it up and how you want to run it. So we're going to run it kind of underneath here and get it run over to this side. Here we are on the driver's side inner. Now if you take a look here, we have this green wire here. Normally this would come uninstalled. So here's the deal with this. This is going to be your fog wire if you code for fog lights. Now because of some of the variations, depending on how people are going to code, if you do not want to code for fog lights, you're going to put that into this pin, which is pin 6. This is 8, this is 7, this is 6. So we'll show you on the screen here where the green wire would go if you want it to be a reverse light. Now because we want it to be a rear fog light in this circumstance and the way we're going to be coding, we're going to be showing you in pin 7. Now this blue wire is going to be your reverse light. So if you're coding for a fog light, you're actually going to run this and it is going to go into pin 6. So we can take a look there. And again, we're going to show on screen here just so you can see reverse light, rear fog light, just for clarification. And same deal as before with these other two wires. We have a red wire and then a black wire. Black wire goes into pin 4. And then the red wire will go into pin 1, and we're going to show you that on screen now, pin 1 and pin 4, and where they are. Now we've completed there, we can lock those in place. So if your tab is having a trouble locking in place, you may want to just give all your wires a little push to make sure that everything's seated all the way, and then give it another push to make sure that you get everything in. Thank you so much for watching our install on our MK7 Facelift taillight harness. Again, purchases for parts like this or any others support videos just like this one. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it.